بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما إنك أنت العليم الحكيم اللهم آمين وبعد. We continue with Safinat al-Najat. Yesterday I was given two comments about the zakat on rented property. And so I shared that one of the opinion of the fuqaha is that the zakat rental property is based on the total amount of rent that you receive for the year minus expenses. I did some more research. The Shafi'i school, there's no zakat on rental property. And this seems to be the predominant opinion, that there's no zakat on rental property, even if you have an entire apartment complex. The land itself and the structure of the building and the property, there's no zakah on property. There might be tax, you have to deal with the government, but there's no zakah. The zakah that you pay is on the income you earned that you possess for over a year and reaches the nisab. So it reaches the nisab, which is about 5,000, we mentioned. And then you possess that amount for a year. If you spent it, let's say you collected $20,000 in rent for that year, but you spent the entire $20,000. You put it back in the house. You have a mortgage, maintenance, repair, so on and so forth. So yes, you received $20,000, but you never actually kept any of that money. It was spent. There's no zakah on it. And if you kept some of that rent, let's say after a year you have 5,000 out of 20,000 left, which is your profit, and you have another 5,000 in cash and another 5,000 in stocks, you add that all together and then you pay 2.5%. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we'll take the opinion from yesterday, discard it. The opinion of the Shafi'i school and the predominant opinion of the ulama is that for zakah on the al-iqarat al-mu'ajjara, or al-ijar in general, they even say, like, if you have an Airbnb, you're not renting it maybe all the time. There's no annual contract, but you're renting it periodically, a few days here, a few weeks here, a few months here. They said there's no rent on the actual property and the lease contract. The rent is what you possess and what you keep in your, and reaches the nisab, and you keep it in your possession for a year, then you pay the zakah. Otherwise, there's no zakah wajib upon you if you spent it. If you have a cab and you work as a cab driver, you're providing a service. People are renting your service. There's no zakah. So on and so forth. And the brother asked yesterday, how about if you have a land, unless you have land that you intend for trade and investment. So you have some cash, you're like, I don't want my cash to sit. I want the market rate for land and real estate is going up everywhere around the world. Buying land in any urban city, any urban community is very expensive. And every year, couple years, the price keeps going up. So what do you say to yourself? Instead of taking that money and just holding the cash, inflation, because if you hold the cash, your cash is losing value because of inflation, right? So if inflation is always going up, so you don't want to just hold cash. Yes, I'm going to get to that. I want to answer this question, then I'll get to yours. So a lot of people, what do they say? Investors typically, they'll tell you, don't hold cash. The longer you hold cash, the more money you lose. So they tell you, invest your money and diversify your wealth, right? So you took your cash, and you're like, I want to invest my cash. I don't want to sit on $50,000. I don't want to sit on $100,000. So you buy a land, or you buy some property, and your intent is not for personal use, but as a business investment. That land you pay zakah on. That one goes under the category of urud al-tijara. It goes under the category of merchandise, inventory of business items. So that one, after a year, you take you see the value of that property, you pay zakah on it. The brother asked yesterday, going back to the message, you said, I bought a land for personal use, but I ended up not using it, then I sold it. So does it fall under the category of urud al-tijara? No, it doesn't. It doesn't fall under the category because your intention was always for personal use. But for some reason, you never got the chance to develop it. You never, ended up using it. So you're like, this land has just been sitting. Let me do something else with my wealth. You sell it. There's no zakah on that property. But when the year ends and you have the nisab in the whole, you pay zakah on the cash but not on the land. Is that clear? Nope, not on the sale amount, the year. But this is something very important. The year is not based on what you got then. It's based on the first moment you got 5,000. So if you got 5,000 in Ramadan, and then the year later in Sha'ban, you got 100,000. You sold your land. Now you have 100,000 in Sha'ban. Do you start from Sha'ban counting 1 year? No. You started already from Ramadan. So as soon as the next Ramadan comes, you pay zakah on the total cash. You don't start a new year every time you get extra money. The time you reach the nisab, and if you start the nisab with 5,000, and let's say, subhanAllah, you have a rich millionaire uncle or dad or somebody passed, and they're like, here, you have all this money. Just before the time ends, now you have $1 million. You pay zakah on $1 million. Although you just got it a few weeks ago. But because you reached the nisab a year ago, you pay the zakah on it when the whole comes. Does that make sense? Brother, you had a question. I'm sorry. I just was responding to what they had from yesterday, so I wanted to clarify. Yeah, it's clear. What was your example?
Yeah, for example, you are here, right?
Yes.
Like you have property back home.
Yes.
The property is rented to someone else.
Yes.
That person paid.
You rented somebody else, they paid you rent.
Yes.
Okay.
The rent collected.
Yes.
There's some money in the bank.
Oh, it's sitting in the bank, yes.
Yeah. Then
After a year, yes.
you pay on that, right?
Yes, exactly. After a year, you pay the zakah on that. What I wanted to clarify is in the Hanafi, in the opinion I shared yesterday, they say there's a zakah on the property. There's a zakah on the property. The majority of the fuqaha say no, there's no zakah on property unless it's urud tijar. Unless you're a real estate investor. You're buying and selling land. Then there's zakah because it's urud tijara. Or zakah on naqd, which is cash, money. Does that make sense? But there's no zakah on property that you rent. You have a apartment complex, you buy 3, 4, 5 houses, you keep expanding your wealth. There's no zakah on that.
But end of the year,
The cash you have at the end of the year is you pay zakah on. And remember, the year is based on the Islamic calendar.
but no property, like no.
No, there's no property tax. You know how there's property tax? There's no zakah on property. There's no property zakah. Does that make sense? There's no property zakah. There's zakah on cash, zakah on business. So you can say there's like a sale, like a sales zakah, and there's a savings zakah. There's no income zakah. Right? So zakah is more easier than tax. Uncle Sam is taking a lot more from us, right? Because you have income zakah, you have sales tax, you have so many property tax, you have business tax, you have so many fees, right? So taxes are a lot more. Zakah says there's nothing on your property. You get your paycheck, you take your entire paycheck home. There's no, income tax. There's no, none of that. The only zakah that you pay is your cash that you saved. So there's a savings tax. In Sharia, you're sitting on money, you're rich. You have to give some of that back to the fuqara. And there's zakah on trade. You have business, you're selling and buying item. You do zakah on the inventory of your items after a year. And of course, there's crops and all the other things that we talked about. Brother.
Quick question. One is for the saving account, for the cash you save.
Yes.
Maximum has to be $5,000.
Minimum. If you never reach 5,000, there's no zakah.
Second question is that.
And remember, this cash, you have to add everything else to it. So let's say you have 2,000 cash, 2,000 Bitcoin, 2,000 stocks, 2,000, does it make sense? 2,000, you have some cash under your bed sitting for emergency, everything together. You see, you bring all the cash you have together, you see, I reached the nisab, then you start counting the year. Is that clear?
For the land.
No.
The land, I would be paying the zakah with the cabinet value or the original value.
The current value.
The current value.
The current value.
So it doesn't matter how much.
But remember, this is land that is for business. You're not for business, but this is land that you're buying and trading. You're buying and trading land. You're selling land. You buy it, you hold it for a couple years, price goes up, you sell. You buy land, you hold it for a year, a couple years, price goes up, you sell. Does that make sense?
How about if you haven't sell it yet, but you still have it, and the value is increasing?
Yeah. And you bought the land with the intention of a business investment? Yeah, then you pay zakah. Because at that point, it's considered urud tijara. And Sheikh Muhammad Mujalli is with us. He's, I don't even, subhanAllah, al-Ma'adar al-Sheikh. I'll introduce the Sheikh. He led us in Salat al-Maghrib. He's an imam in the Dallas, Texas. And mashallah, it was beautiful to have his tilawah and his presence with us. I wanted the Sheikh to give us a reminder, but he insisted on speaking. He's from Yemen. That's where, that's my home. That's my home, my second home. I studied there. I got married there. I had my kids there. I completed my everything there. So I learned Arabic there, the Quran, everything. That's all of this is from, even the Sheikh of the book right here we're reading, he's from Hadramaut, from Yemen. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless Ahl al-Yemen and reward Sheikh Muhammad for his presence. Ameen.
So even you buy the land to farm, right?
Yes.
But your intention...
No, the farm is different. If you buy land to farm, you pay zakah on the crops. On the crops. Just an investment, right? Yeah, there's no farming yet. And you pay, wallahu alam, if you're keeping it for the intention of investment, there's no intention of personal use, there's no intention of nothing, you're buying it, just investment. I just want to buy some land, then the Sheikh can correct me.
You're right.
If you're buying your niyyah is, I'm buying this land because I have cash and I don't want my cash to sit, I want land in my hand. And when the money goes up, I'm going to sell it. Does that make sense?
I just remember something.
No.
The brothers, he came to me and he said, okay, so the tax that we paying,
Yeah.
it's considered zakah. And it has to be tax
And zakah, yeah. Interesting mas'ala. Very interesting. The brother said, mashallah, he said, we're already paying tax, so can we just consider it zakah? Some of that money is going to welfare, some of that money is going to school, Allah, that's an interesting mas'ala. I'm not going to comment on that. I'll leave the Sheikh to answer. Now I'm elder. Yes, Haji.
Okay, I have, for a regular worker,
Mm-hmm.
if they give you the W-2, they said you made 30,000 in the year, and at the end of the year you don't have nothing. What's going to be?
No zakah.
Okay.
You only pay zakah on savings. Only on savings. So you could have made $1 million that year, but you spent $1 million. There's no zakah. Does that make sense? There's no zakah on income. That's why we said you know how there's income tax? Income tax, they're like, you made this money. You spent it on a car, you bought a house, you made this income. You have to pay tax, right? There's certain brackets, discounts, breaks you get. After that, what you spent on your money, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you have zero income. It doesn't matter if you have a mortgage rate that's $1 million and you're in debt. The fact is, there's of course tax and there's details, but generally, income tax is looking at your income, not at your savings. You pay tax, right? Zakah is not like that. It's a lot easier. Zakah is, you made $1 million from that million, or 100,000 or 30,000, how much is in your savings? And did you have that in your savings for 1 year? So zakah is saying, listen, you might have a moment in your life where you have 10,000, 20,000, maybe it's in your hand. But, something came up. You had to travel, you went to Hajj, your son got married, you helped him out with his marriage. Whatever the reason, you spent the money. Then they say, khalas, start over again. If you kept it for 9 months, you had 20,000 for 9 months. 3 months before the year is over, you spent that money. You bought a car. And you're like, okay, I don't have the money. No zakah. Again, you get 5,000 again, you start counting over again. Does that make sense? So you have to keep the 5,000 balance, that minimum, we call that nisab, that's the term. You have to keep the nisab for one continuous year. If it goes below 5,000, you start over again when you get another 5,000. Huh?
How that 5,000 comes to minimum?
The amount of this nisab, we get it from gold. So the nisab in gold is 85 grams roughly. So when we convert 85 grams to dollar value, it's roughly 5,000. Wallahu alam. Yes?
Based on Islamic calendar, right?
And this is based on the Islamic calendar, very important. Based on the Islamic calendar. So you count like today, let's say, this is the beginning of the year. A lot of people, they get refund on their income tax, right? So this year you got a refund on the income tax. You have 5,000 sitting in your account. You count. Okay, today? Let's say you got your refund today. Today is Sha'ban, the 24th of Sha'ban, I believe. So, no, the 25th, I believe today, the 25th of Sha'ban. Today is the 25th of Sha'ban. So you mark that day. Every year, the 25th of Sha'ban, you pay your zakah. Not March 18. Don't tell me, because March 18, Sha'ban, because the Islamic calendar goes down 10 days every year. Right? So 13 years ago, I remember Sha'ban the 29th, I was in Yemen. My son was born, the day before Ramadan. So I remember the day before Ramadan, Sha'ban. But on the Gregorian calendar, his birthday is August 20th. So August 20th is still 6 months away, right? Nearly 6 months away. But in the Islamic calendar, his birthday is in 4 days. So he turns 14 in the Islamic calendar in 4 days. But in the Gregorian calendar, he turns 14 in about 5 months. Does that make sense? So that is why we don't use the Gregorian calendar to calculate zakah and Islamic ahkam. We use the Islamic calendar. And because the Islamic calendar, it goes 10 days down and it moves through the seasons. Does that make sense? Like Ramadan is going to be winter, summer, spring, right? It's going to go through all the seasons. And every 30 or so years, it goes through all the seasons. So it's different than the Gregorian calendar. So for zakah, you have to mark the Islamic calendar day and month. And every year you save that day. When it comes, you pay your zakah. Yes?
How about on 401k?
We talked about 401k yesterday. You know zakah on 401k, according to the stronger opinion of the scholars and the predominant opinion, until you're able to access it without penalty. The problem with 401k is you can't access it. If you access it, you have to pay it back with interest. The moment you're able to access it without penalty, then you start paying zakah. Until then, there's no. It's like somebody owes you $10,000. Do you count that in your zakah? You don't. If you're unable to get it back for them, you're trying, you call them, they're like, brother, give me time next week, next month, next year. They're not picking up your phone calls. Is there zakah on that money they owe you? No zakah until you're able to access it. Does that make sense? So inshallah, we'll suffice with these masail. We're going to read Kitab al-Sawm tomorrow. We should finish Sawm in 2 nights, inshallah. So Sunday, Monday, we'll finish, inshallah ta'ala, and conclude with the Shaykh Muhammad. Tad'u lana akhi. Allah akhir, barakallah fi. We're going to have the Shaykh make dua, inshallah ta'ala.
الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. اللهم اجعل القرآن العظيم ربيع قلوبنا ونور صدورنا وذهاب همومنا وغمومنا. اللهم ذكرنا منه ما نسينا وعلمنا منه ما جهلنا وارزقنا تلاوته آناء الليل وأطراف النهار على الوجه الذي يرضيك عنا يا رب العالمين. اللهم أرنا الحق حقا وارزقنا اتباعه وأرنا الباطل باطلا وارزقنا اجتنابه يا رب العالمين. اللهم اجعلنا هداة مهديين غير ضالين ولا مضلين سلما لأوليائك وحربا على أعدائك. نحب بحبك من أحبك ونعادي بعداوتك من خالفك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم ألف بين قلوبنا واهدنا سبل السلام وجنبنا الفتن ما ظهر منها وما بطن يا رب العالمين. اللهم اغفر لآبائنا وأمهاتنا والمسلمين وردنا إلى دينك ردا جميلا واختم بالصالحات أعمالنا وأعمارنا يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم يا رب العالمين نسألك بأسمائك الحسنى وبصفاتك العلى أن تبلغنا شهر رمضان. اللهم بلغنا شهر رمضان وأعنا على الصيام والقيام يا رب العالمين واجعلنا فيه من المقبولين يا رب العالمين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. جزاكم الله خيرا.
Yes, brother. You got a question? Separate? خلاص, I'm here. Yeah, definitely.
What's that?